It's one thing to pass a state law to protect Virginians. It's quite another to put that protection in the state constitution. There's a word for it: important. The business of the Virginia legislature this winter includes proposed changes to the state constitution. Those changes, known as amendments, ultimately have to be approved by voters. But before voters get their say, the General Assembly has to endorse them twice, with a House of Delegates election in between. Three of those amendments are big deals with Democrats, who barely control the House and Senate. There's another amendment that Republicans, they're in the minority at the state capitol, are talking up. One of the Democrat-pushed amendments would guarantee a woman's right to an abortion. No ifs, ands, or buts. Democrats first promised to include that right in the state constitution after the U.S. Supreme Court 2 years ago ended nearly a half century of federal abortion rights protections. As for the other amendments favored by Democrats, one would erase from the Constitution a ban on same-sex marriage approved by Virginians in 2006. That amendment is illegal because the Supreme Court declared in 2015 that civil same-sex marriage is a right protected by the U.S. Constitution. The Third Amendment would guarantee that voting rights are automatically restored to felons after they've completed their penalties. The Virginia Constitution currently says, and has for more than a century, that the governor alone can give back that right, and only after a felon asks the governor to do so. That process can take a long time, and because the governor's power is discretionary, he can say no or just ignore the request. This issue has a racial dimension, in that controlling who votes and how many people vote goes back to the time when Virginia was run by a handful of conservative white guys who didn't want black people participating in politics. The Republicans have their own ideas for amending the Constitution. They wanted to include a prohibition on union membership as a condition for a job. The shorthand for this: right to work. It's been state law since the late 1940s, and it keeps unions weak by making it harder to recruit members. Republicans, who aren't exactly friendly to labor unions, want to get this ban in the Constitution because they fear Democrats will repeal the so-called right-to-work law. It would be tougher, a lot tougher, to eliminate this anti-union rule if it were in the Constitution. Voters turned down this amendment in 2016, and Democrats will probably kill it in the legislature this year. But that will give both political parties something to tell their voters, to get them riled up for the election this year when Virginians choose a new governor and decide control of the House. And depending who's in charge of the legislature next year will determine whether voters say their piece on these amendments. For the Richmond Times-Dispatch, this is Jeff Shapiro.